So, Missouri during the American Civil War. It was a dumpster fire of brutal partisan activity on both sides, simply put. However, for our purposes, we only need concern ourselves with the Confederate partisans who commonly conducted raids into neighboring Kansas to hurt both Union morale and logistics. However, given how common these raids were for their western neighbor, it raises the question of why didn't these raids occur to the north in Iowa? Well, Iowa's many militias spent much of the war either patrolling the border or joining Union troops in northern Missouri to push partisans away from the border, therefore making raids such as those experienced in Kansas rare at best in Iowa. But that doesn't mean they didn't happen. Case in point, October 12, 1864, a group of 12 heavily armed Confederate partisans dressed in federal uniforms crossed into Davis County, Iowa. Upon entering into the county, they began going door to door, robbing anyone they could find in the southern portion of the county, breaking everyone's muskets while they were at it, and even taking a handful of hostages just for good measure. Now, despite the amount of noise these partisans were making in Davis County, the majority of citizens didn't even notice. Why? Well, the county fair was going on at the same time, so nobody even really cared. Well, that wasn't until a courier showed up telling the citizens that a detachment of 150 Confederates were pillaging the county with the rest of the Confederate army not too far behind. So, should we cancel the fair? Yeah, we should probably cancel the fair, shouldn't we? So grabbing their guns, the citizens of Davis County formed their own militia, led by future 1892 presidential candidate James B. Weaver, and marched down to the southern half of the county. In the meantime, the partisans continued robbing anyone they could find, even murdering one guy who refused to hand over his horses and another guy who mistook them for federal troops. Which, side note, one of my sources calls the specific partisan who shot these people a, quote, soulless wretch, and it later simply refers to him as, quote, the fiend. God, I love the unapologetic way this book is written. Anyway, soon afterwards, the Davis County militia caught up with the partisans and realized they weren't dealing with an entire army, instead just a dozen random dudes who quickly fled back across the border. However, this didn't mean the partisans had been defeated. Quite the opposite, actually, as they soon began making sporadic raids into the county for around the next month, with the Davis County militia, assisted by the Lee County militia and a detachment of the state militia, scaring the partisans back across the border each time. This continued until November 7th when, for no apparent reason, two of the partisans just showed up at the county courthouse in Bloomfield and surrendered to the militia. According to these men, the partisans attempted to link up with Confederate General Sterling Price. However, due to his defeat at the Battle of Westport to everyone's favorite underrated Union general Samuel Curtis earlier in October, they were cut off from joining the larger Confederate war effort. So the partisans instead decided to split up and flee to different corners of the country, with these two deciding to surrender. And just like that, the Davis County raid was over. And fast forwarding 160 or so years later, few remember this month-long raid, despite it being one of the only times that a major war has spilt Iowan blood on Iowan soil. Nowadays, there exists a monument south of Bloomfield memorializing the citizens killed during the raid. It also claims that this was the northernmost battle fought during the Civil War, which has created some discussion on whether the Davis County raid or Morgan's raid in Ohio was actually farther north. And although the Davis County raid occurred ever so slightly more north, both were beaten out for the title by the St. Albans raid in Vermont. Even though all three are technically not battles. I love torturing myself with the minute details of human suffering.